Thomas and Natalie crossed paths at an intellectual game after being invited by mutual friends to join the same team. From the very beginning, Thomas was fascinated by Natalie's calm and thoughtful demeanor. Within a week of meeting, they started dating and surprised everyone by getting married just 3 months later. Despite the disapproval of their loved ones, Thomas and Natalie were confident that they had made the right choice. They did not organize a lavish wedding celebration and preferred to sign the documents and go to the sea. For a year and a half of life together, they never once doubted the correctness of their decision. However, recently circumstances have changed, temporarily forcing them to live in different cities. Thomas had a job, which he could not refuse, and Natalie had to take care of her sick mother and solve family problems. Natalie returned to her hometown, initially thinking it would be a short stay, but the situation dragged on longer than expected. Despite the distance, they found joy in the fact that the towns they lived in were relatively close, allowing them to spend weekends and holidays together. They were constantly making plans for the future, looking forward to living together again in their own apartment, discussing their dreams of starting a family and discovering new stages in their lives. During this difficult period, Natalie felt exhausted and worn down by the circumstances she was facing. Seeking solace and distraction, she decided to visit a bookstore. There she unexpectedly met Jonathan. At first, Natalie tried to avoid socializing, but Jonathan was persistent and eventually she gave in. He kindly recommended books and invited her to have a cup of coffee at a nearby cafe. Not understanding the reason for her actions, Natalie found herself in a quandary. However, the hours that followed, spent in delightful company, were precious to her. Jonathan was a fascinating conversationalist, telling anecdotes about his profession, his education in the capital, and his return to his hometown. When they parted, Natalie felt sincere regret and took the initiative to ask for his contact information to continue their communication. She liked Jonathan's infectious smile so much that she was reluctant to say goodbye. Soon, they began texting and calling each other regularly. Jonathan brought a spark of joy to Natalie's monotonous existence, hidden from her husband Thomas. She made up a story about meeting an old school friend instead of revealing the truth about her new acquaintance. Ignoring his wife's deception, Thomas found comfort in the fact that she had found a man who could dilute the routine of her daily life. Natalie began secret dates with Jonathan, enjoying their time together. He showered her with thoughtful gestures, such as going to cafes and buying books. Once he took her out for an evening by the water to watch a mesmerizing sunset. As they talked intimately on the shore until late at night, Natalie felt the urge to kiss Jonathan. After this secluded trip, their acquaintance went from simple friendship to something more intimate. Thomas began to notice his wife's growing distance from him and realized that her messages no longer included complaints about her sisters and fatigue. The truth had eluded him until Natalie Avery's older sister had seen her leaving a restaurant with a mysterious man in a tender embrace. The sisters had a strained relationship dating back to their childhood. Avery often tried to provoke and anger her sister. One day, Avery discreetly took pictures of Natalie with her boyfriend while sitting in the car. Although the pictures weren't high quality, they clearly showed Natalie with someone else. Wasting no time, Avery sent the incriminating pictures to Thomas, who, upon seeing them, quickly called her. "Who is that?" asked Thomas, surprised by the discovery. Avery mockingly replied, "Isn't that your dear wife?" Thomas, feeling insulted by Avery's tone, abruptly hung up the phone and scrutinized the photos. Despite trying to convince himself otherwise, Thomas couldn't ignore the gut feeling that something was wrong. Determined to get to the bottom of the situation, he took some time off work and decided to follow Natalie without her knowledge. After renting a car, Thomas discreetly followed Natalie to see who she was seeing. After learning that his wife was going out with a friend, Thomas began secretly following her movements. He followed her to the restaurant and watched outside through the panoramic windows, where he noticed his wife with another man inside. He noticed Natalie walk over to a table where the man in the picture was already seated. The couple exchanged a kiss, and, chatting merrily, began to choose their food. Thomas couldn't stand to watch his wife fondling another man for long, so he walked resolutely into the restaurant and headed for their table. "Well, hello there," he exclaimed loudly, making Natalie flinch. "Thomas," she exclaimed in surprise. Thomas extended his hand towards Jonathan and introduced himself. "I'm Thomas, Natalie's husband. Nice to meet you." Jonathan was equally stunned and visibly shocked. His eyes widened as he looked back and forth at Natalie and Thomas, opening and closing his mouth like a fish gasping for air. The rest of the diners were intrigued, and there was silence as all eyes turned to the trio. Natalie's face flushed red with embarrassment, and without a word, she grabbed her purse and hurried outside. The men followed her. "Wait," Thomas called out to her. "We need to talk." Jonathan disappeared, leaving Thomas and Natalie alone. Thomas suggested that they get in the car to continue their conversation, and she reluctantly agreed. Once in the car, Thomas demanded an explanation from his wife. Why she had done this, why she had deceived him. Natalie remained silent, only shrugging her shoulders. This infuriated Thomas, and he could no longer contain his anger. "Do you love me?" he asked her in a soft tone. Once again, Natalie shrugged her shoulders. Such an indifferent answer did not please Thomas. He couldn't understand how someone could not know if they loved another person. In his mind, there were only two answers, yes or no. And if she didn't know, it was an unequivocal no. He thought she was just afraid to admit it. "He understands," he said, started the car, and drove toward Natalie's parents' house. Surprisingly, he felt an overwhelming calm inside him, as if a heavy burden had suddenly been lifted from his shoulders. For the first time, he had wondered if their impending marriage to Thomas had been a mistake, and now it seemed that reality was unfolding accordingly. He informed Natalie that he would be bringing her things over the coming weekend, and suggested that they head to the registry office to begin the divorce proceedings. Natalie acquiesced to his suggestion. She tried to call Jonathan several times, but he didn't pick up. Finally, he sent her a message saying that he could no longer see her because of the betrayal she had hidden from him, the fact that she was already married. Natalie's heart shattered. It took her a long time to pick up the pieces and move on with her life. When she found out that her sister had told Thomas the truth, she made the difficult decision to leave and cut ties with the family completely. She wanted nothing more to do with them. After the divorce, Thomas cut off all communication with his ex-wife. However, through mutual acquaintances, he learned that she had moved to the capital for work and cut ties with almost everyone. Recognizing that their marriage had been a mistake, he was grateful that he had managed to come out of it relatively unscathed.